Now, some of the ways technology can be used to bring us under the control of a one world government, I'm going to share with you now. I think the first thing we need to be looking out for, I think it's the next thing to come against us, is the digital ID, the digital identification. There are a lot of things that have to happen, but I think that's probably the next thing that's going to come against us. A few months ago, there were discussions in Washington about implementing a digital ID for everyone who is on Medicare and Medicaid. To start there, and then of course to expand it until everyone is required to have a digital ID. Now, a lot of folks wouldn't give this a second thought. They'd say, well, we already have a social security number, we already have a number for this and a number for that. Well, the digital ID is going to be much different than any other ID that we have. The digital identifier will be some sort of number or code that will be assigned to a person, and a person has to use this number or this code to access almost anything. They will have to have this code, this number, to access their digital currency. Once cash is eliminated, all currency will be stored in computers. There'll be no tangible currency, no paper, no coins. It'll all be stored in computers, and somebody's going to have control of those computers. Be it government, banks, or both. Some entity is going to be controlling these computers, and they're going to use this digital ID as a gateway. And if you are in their good graces, if you're doing everything you should and not doing anything you shouldn't, then your digital ID will allow you to access your wealth or your currency, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes I call it money, but I always put quotation marks around it because it's really just ones and zeros in computers. But a person will be required to have a digital ID in order to buy and sell. Now, the digital ID in and of itself is not the mark of the beast. We'll see that later. But it is a big step toward the mark of the beast. Again, assigning every person in the world eventually a digital ID. And without this ID, they won't be able to access their wealth. They won't be able to drive a car. They won't be able to go or do anything at all. Every aspect of our life will be governed, by whether or not we have this ID. Now, if you don't think that's possible, here a few months ago, this happened in Kuwait, and it's not a digital ID in the sense of, well, it is a digital ID, but it is an ID that required the people of Kuwait to surrender biometric data. And this was last year, a year ago. It said by October 31st, all bank cards belonging to customers who have not completed the fingerprinting process will be deactivated. In other words, if you haven't surrendered your biometric data to the state, your card will be deactivated. Now, if a person has cash, they could probably still get by. But we're going to be in a world soon that does not have cash. It said limiting their ability to make purchases or access cash. And then it says starting December 1st, that was last December 1st, a complete freeze will be imposed on all accounts of Kuwaiti citizens who have not complied with the biometric fingerprinting requirement. This freeze will extend to all bank balances and other financial assets, including shares, funds, and portfolios managed by private or government entities. Now, that's from KuwaitLocal.com. And so it's already happening in other parts of the world. In India, they have the Aadhaar identification system, where every person is to have a government-issued ID card and ID number. This is already taking hold in many countries around the world, and I believe eventually it's all going to be merged into one entity that will be used to control the people of the world. Now, the holy grail of tyrants has always been the ability to try to control the people, or the ability to control the people. You know, every tyrant wants to be able to have people do what he says without any blowback, without any problem, without any questions. And up until our generation, tyrants had to use police or military to do this. But when you think about having a digital ID, then people will have to comply or starve. And so the digital ID, along with some other things that are being put in place, the digital ID and these other measures will enable a tyrant to control people by simply controlling their ability to buy and sell. He won't have to have a huge police force. He won't have to send soldiers after them. If they're not compliant, well, we'll just turn off their card. We'll deny them access to what's rightfully theirs, but we don't care. We just want them to do what we say. And so that is the holy grail of tyrants, to be able to control the people with as little effort as is possible. Now, the next step, I think, that will be taken will be the central bank digital currency. In other words, an electronic currency. You know, cash is being used less and less. And the government certainly would like very much to do away with cash. You know, that's an expensive system to maintain. You know, when you think about having to print bills and then replace bills that are lost or worn out or destroyed, when you think about what's required to make coins and to distribute them, you know, here and there, you know, it's quite burdensome. And so they would much rather have a system that is digital. Have you thought about all these fiber optic systems that are being put in place everywhere? I guess they're doing it here. I know down in our part of the world, every road now is being dug up and they're putting in fiber optic lines, giving every home access to the internet. Well, that's all part of this. You know, to enable people just to buy and sell, you know, at home, you know, over the internet. You won't need cash. But cash is being eliminated. You know, it's already been destroyed. Any value that it had is practically used up. You know, since 1913, I think the value of the United States dollar is something like maybe 3 or 4 cents. I might be wrong in that, but I believe it's something like that. You know, it's been inflated so much that, you know, now it's practically worthless. Well, I think there's going to come a day when indeed the current monetary system we have is going to collapse. And I believe it'll be because of inflation, that the money will just simply be worthless. And when that happens, you know, they'll say, well, we have to have some sort of system to buy and sell. We'll just implement a totally cashless system. But again, that cashless system is going to give them a tremendous amount of power over people, because again, you will have to access it, and whoever controls the system will control our access to it. And if they don't like us for whatever reason, be it political, religious, you know, the color of our skin, whatever it may be, they can deny us access to the ability to buy and sell. Now, I did write a book about this about 20 years ago, but one thing I did not foresee that has been talked about a great deal lately is the fact that a digital currency, a central bank digital currency, when it's issued, it will be programmable. The currency itself will be programmable. In other words, there will be boundaries set on how it can be used. In other words, in my case, there might be some boundaries set where it said, well, Pastor Guest, you're overweight. You can buy food, but you can only buy the kind of food we want you to have because we want you to lose weight. You're becoming a burden on our healthcare system. And so you can only buy this amount of these certain kinds of food, and that's it. That's all you can have. You know, they could put any kind of restraints on it they want. And not getting into it deeply, but, you know, with the 15-minute cities, you know, they're wanting to confine people into areas where supposedly they'll have everything they need within a 15-minute walk of their home. With a 15-minute city, their currencies could be programmed so if they go outside the boundaries of their 15-minute city, their currency cannot be used. If they want to see an ant in a neighboring town, if they leave their area, they can't buy gas, they can't buy food, they can't buy anything. Their card would be completely useless. And so to transition into a completely cashless society, that will give the powers that be tremendous power over everyone. And I believe that's the primary reason that they want to do away with cash and implement the central bank digital currency. Now, there's one other component to this cashless system that I don't think too many people know about. I've written about it, but I'll share it with you now. Back in July of 2023, on July 20th of 2023, the FedNow system became operational. Now people might say, well, what is FedNow? Well, FedNow is a mechanism, if you will, that's been implemented by the Federal Reserve. Up until July 20th, 2023, if I went into a store, say I went into Walmart, and I wanted to make a purchase, I would go to the checkout line and I would remove my card, my credit card. They would ring up my purchase. I would insert my card, the purchase would be completed. Now, up until that date, up until the implementation of the FedNow system, the only people involved in that transaction would be me, my bank, Walmart, and their bank, or whatever it is they use to handle their transaction. It was just straightforward. The FedNow system, though, is a system through which every digital transaction must flow. In other words, now if I go to Walmart and make a purchase and put my card into the card reader, it, of course, still involves me and my bank, but that transaction has to flow through the FedNow mechanism before it gets to Walmart's bank, or again, whatever it is they use. And then it comes back from there through FedNow to me. So a third party has been inserted into what used to be a two-party deal or transaction. Now, this not only means that the Federal Reserve has a record of every purchase you make and what you pay for it, when you bought it, where you bought it. They have a record of all of that. It's possible that one day that could be the gate that could be shut and prevent a purchase from being made. But look up the FedNow program. It's a very troubling thing that they have already put in place. This was, of course, done under Biden. But I think all these things are going to continue because these forces that are at work are much more powerful than Donald Trump. We might have a bit of a respite, but I think things are going to continue, and I don't think Trump or anyone else will be able to stop these things from happening, because the devil is putting the pedal to the metal to implement his program. And so, again, look up the FedNow program. Even if you write a check, you know how they electronically scan them, the check goes through that. The only way that it is not monitored by the Fed is if it's cash, and perhaps they have a way to do that now. I don't know.